Hello and welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. My name is David Zipper. I am a senior fellow at the MIT Mobility Initiative and a contributing writer at Vox and Bloomberg City Lab focused on transportation. And I am joined by Wes. Wes, who are you?
Wes Marshall. I'm a professor of civil engineering at the University of Colorado, Denver.
And we are very excited to have all of you with us, whether you are joining us on the live stream or listening afterwards via your favorite podcasting app. I will give a little bit of a caveat this time before we get going, in that I have a new audience member live for this session. He looks like he might be asleep, so hopefully I'll be a little more interesting to come. But his name is Waffle House. He's a cat, a 2-year-old tabby that my wife and I adopted 2 days ago, and this is his first podcast. He's literally sitting on the couch about 6 feet away from me. So if he starts getting, if you hear some yowling or meowing or God knows what, you'll know why. But he's happy to be here. I'm just assuming because he seems happy with life as it is. I don't know, Wes. Do you have cats?
I do not have cats. I'm quite allergic to cats, and we try to stay away from them as much as possible. But we have dogs, more dogs than we kind of need. We just got a third dog, so my house is quite chaotic. So this new puppy, Bowie, is a little bit crazy these days.
Nice. I'm actually more of a dog person than a cat person normally. So, but this cat is sort of winning me over. It just sort of worked out better for where we live because Waffle House seems to love belly rubs. I've never been a cat that likes belly rubs before. Have you heard of such a thing?
Our dog, or 2 out of our 3 dogs, very much enjoy that. But
well, they're dogs. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's a dog thing. So anyway, Waffle House is literally passed out on the couch. So maybe we'll be just fine. So that's a little something about me. But maybe to before we jump in, I'll ask a little something about you. It's always fun to help folks get to know ourselves a little bit better around transportation. So I'm curious, Wes, what is your first memory of public transit?
First memory of public transit.
Yeah.
So I think I took when I was a kid, we would take the bus either to Fenway Park or Harvard Square quite a bit.
In Boston.
In the Boston area. So I grew up in Watertown, which is the next town just west of Boston. And there were some direct bus lines to those 2 places. So those were the most common ones. But even earlier than that, I remember going to a Celtics game when I was even younger than when I was able to take the bus by myself. And North Station is sort of right there. And I remember getting on a train. I think we went somewhere to South Station. So I remember doing a train earlier than that. But I think that it's something in and around Boston back in those days.
Were you one of those? Well, but I'll tell you in a second. But first, I'm just curious. Were you one of those kids who was memorizing the entire transit map of your city at age 4, which does seem like it happens quite a bit?
No, I was not. That was not in my wheelhouse.
You're normal, is what you're saying. You're not an autistic weirdo like many of us.
Yeah, but what we very much enjoyed was, especially in Boston, the super hard Boston accent that when you're getting off at Harvard Square, every time you get off at any stop in Boston, it is whatever voice they had on all those stops was the most Boston of all Boston accents, and we love that quite often.
I respect that. I respect it. So for me, I grew up in North Carolina where, I didn't take transit really, but my grandparents lived in New York City growing up in Queens. So when we would visit them, we would take the subway sometimes in Manhattan. And I honestly thought that Manhattan was just a place you go to get bagels and smoked fish at Zabar's in the Upper West Side and to take the subway and hang out. I was embarrassingly old, in college when I realized actually there's well over 1 million people that live in Manhattan. It had always just been a place to sort of go to on day trips for me. But yeah, I remember taking the subway and really liking it back in, I guess it would be the 80s. So for both of us, I guess it was Northeastern Heavy Rail. There you go.
Yeah, very much so.
Nice.
New York, I didn't get to quite as often, but there's That's how I treated New York too. You go there for bagels or pizza or something like that, and I would try to get out of there as soon as I could.
Oh, spoken like a good Bostonian. I
Yeah.
respect it. All right, let's keep going. So next up is word on the street. This is the session with each episode where we discuss a topic in the news that we believe is worthy of attention and discussion. And today we want to talk about America seemingly trying to export car bloat. This has been reported in Reuters and in several European outlets. We'll share some links in the show notes afterwards, if not in the YouTube now. But according to a new agreement, a trade agreement between the EU and the Trump administration, both the EU and the US intend, and I'm quoting here, intend to accept and provide mutual recognition to each other's standards for a variety of industrial goods, seemingly including automobiles. That's a big deal because Europe has very different standards for cars than the US does. And
Very different.
yes, I'm going to quote the European Transport Safety Council, which said when this agreement was publicized, allowing American vehicles onto the EU market on the basis of quote unquote mutual recognition of standards is a betrayal of Europe's safety leadership and it will cost lives. Europe now risks being flooded with oversized, underregulated US pickup trucks and SUVs, vehicles that are heavier, more dangerous to other car drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists, and completely out of step with Europe's vision for safer, more sustainable mobility. Now, this approach toward trade negotiations around mutual recognition is one that the Trump administration has also pursued with Japan. And it's going to get interesting here because Europe and other countries, pretty much everyone except us in the US, has pedestrian safety tests and other kinds of safety tests that we do not. So I have some other thoughts on this, but I want to pause and hear what you think about all this, Wes.
Well, the pedestrian safety test being the probably biggest difference, right? Is that? Well, I mean, even before you brought this up as a potential topic for us to hit on, I saw the news and I asked some friends of mine that are either European or friends that go there much more often than I do, and very few of them thought it was that big a deal because their thinking was nobody over there wants what we're selling. Like they live in places where it's not exactly that useful to have a big SUV, nor is it practical, nor is it possible, and even in a lot of the places, I didn't feel like it was quite that much. There are sort of places in Europe where maybe this would be more enticing, but I don't know. That was an interesting, thought process is that they didn't even want this.
So I think that's exactly the right question to ask. I would start off by saying, first of all, the Trump administration, the U.S., telling other countries to ignore their own pedestrian safety rules is wrong and obnoxious and shouldn't be happening. It's bullying, let's be clear. But that said, I think there's a lot of reasons why Europeans and Japanese don't really want a Cadillac Escalade or a Hummer, even if they could legally import it and drive it. And there's several. One is there's tight parking spots in a lot of big cities with narrow streets in Europe compared to the US, where these cars are just not that comfortable to use. Gas is more expensive in most other countries that are wealthy than the US.
Much more so.
And yeah. And in a number of European countries, including Denmark and Norway and France, they have weight-based fees for new cars, which I assume would be applied to US cars as well. So you're paying thousands of euros more to buy on top of the sticker price if you really wanted to buy a Goliath like US pickup or SUV. So it's not obvious to me that if this does go through, there's going to be a big rush to buy, Detroit's sort of like, giant cars. I think that, frankly, Europe, to its credit, has some backstops in place to protect them. And I think Japan does as well. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the people that are trying to buy those like Alibaba, like Chinese tiny electric vehicles, and you can buy them from those websites, but as far as I know, they're not street legal here. So I mean, maybe it's more something like that. Like in some places, in some parts of Europe, you could buy the big US SUVs, but maybe they're not street legal in certain places there. And so there might be like different layers of rules as opposed to
Yeah.
just the fact that you can, like, mutual recognition of standards is one thing, but I think different levels of agencies are going to have different rules to maybe keep it from, if it starts becoming a problem, from actually becoming a problem.
I think that's right. And to be clear, we don't know yet what these exact rules are going to look like. All that's been released, that I've seen at least, are general statements of agreements.
Yeah,
So the devil's in the details, to be clear.
I read that White House press release, and it's like one paragraph amongst a lot of other similar ones. And the focus is on trade. It's about selling things, and that paragraph is about cars.
That's right. And I think, there's a couple other points I think are worth keeping in mind. One is like, why is Trump's team pushing for this? Well, they want to aid Detroit. It's a swing state, obviously. They want to help the U.S. get a leg up in the auto industry, which has become even more competitive than before with the ascent of Chinese automakers, which is just roiling Europe in a lot of global markets. And the U.S. is really good in the auto industry at really one thing and one thing alone, which is producing really expensive giant cars for the domestic market. And if GM and Ford can sell some of those giant cars outside of the U.S., that's great for them. I just am very skeptical that they'll be able to. I would also note one other point, which is that this has already been a bit of an issue in Europe. That group ETSC that I was quoting earlier, they've been mounting a campaign. They got some coverage in the Financial Times a few months ago, I remember, looking at how a decent number, like I think it's in like the tens of thousands, but don't quote me on that, number of like Dodge Rams have been imported through this like exceptional circumstance loophole that the EU has for cars that don't comply with their normal safety rules. And the ETSC and some safety campaigners are really mad about this and saying we shouldn't do that. But already, like I'm sure that the Trump team is hearing from U.S. automakers that want help getting more of these cars into Europe. It's already been an issue, and if nothing else, based on what little we know about these agreements in their preliminary stages, it's likely to become even more of one in the months and years ahead, as long as Trump is around. I hate to say.
Did you hear that Jay Leno has been trying to get a loophole placed into the California rules to allow a lot of his older cars don't have to go through the same? I think it's focused on emissions. I wasn't really sure what he was thinking, but I heard it failed. I heard he did not get that over the finish line.
Oh, well, Jay Leno, I'm really sorry to hear that, buddy. I hope you're hanging in there. He's a legendary car guy. He's like
Yeah.
beloved in the car community in Southern California. I've heard people talk about it. So anyway, this is a topic that we'll keep an eye on. I mean, car bloat has really been, it's like an American export, or an American innovation that's becoming an export, I should say. So we'll be watching this story. At least I'll be watching this story. I don't know. I think I would encourage people to keep an eye on it. And if there's European and Japanese listeners, I'll just say, I'm sorry, but hopefully your countrymen won't be buying these cars, even if they are allowed on your streets.
We will see. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Over to you. Oh, sorry. Not over to me. Forgive me.
We
No,
flip things.
we flip things. Roundabout is the next section. This is where Wes and I pick a topic that we would like to discuss, and I am going first this time around. And the topic I'm interested in is automatic traffic cameras. That's a very hot topic where I live in Washington, D.C. right now, because Congress, because it has nothing better to do, apparently, is currently trying to block DC from having red light or speed cameras, of which we have many in this city right now. And it's interesting. There's a whole media narrative that people hate red light cameras and speed cameras. They're widely loathed. You see this all in all kinds of local TV segments and local news. And I wrote a story in Bloomberg City Lab a couple of weeks ago, basically saying that's BS. It's just not true. Not only do automatic cameras save lives, and they really do, there's a whole mountain of evidence for both speed cameras and for red light cameras showing that they reduce crashes as well as speeding. They do so reliably, but people actually like them. There's been a number of surveys taken in central cities as well as in the suburbs, some national surveys too, that showed that a majority of Americans support automatic traffic enforcement. And it's a huge majority of Democrats, a majority of independents, and a plurality, not actually close to plurality, it's almost even, in among Republicans, according to a survey a few years ago by Sarah Sayo at New York University that I think some people listening to this podcast will be familiar with. She's a well-known researcher. And interestingly, in the story that I wrote, I was struck that, I was once on a panel a few years ago where there was a person of color on the panel with me who said, we cannot have automatic traffic cameras. We cannot have cameras, quote unquote, policing black bodies. That's what I remember. And it stayed with me. And what was striking to me is when I talked to a city leader here in transportation here in DC, they told me that they actually get a disproportionate number of automatic camera requests from areas east of the Anacostia River, which are predominantly low income and African American, which might make sense because those are the areas where the greatest risk of dying in a crash exists because of a legacy of historical racist location of arterials and such like that. So maybe there's a disconnect in some ways between some activists and what residents actually want. So I give like automatic traffic cameras like 2 thumbs up, big fan. Wes, what do you think?
So this was really interesting to me because this is not a strand of research I dug into much before, and I think I sort of took the media reports at face value that people did hate them, that people were worried about them being a cash grab, that people were thinking Big Brother is now watching us. But I mean, obviously Google or Apple already knows where you are all the time anyways.
Right.
But when I started looking at this research after we kind of talked about this as a topic, I was like, oh man, like it's sort of overwhelming. I couldn't find any legitimate papers that showed it as something people hated. Like, I think you could also, the researcher in me might say, well, I mean, the kind of person that might respond to this kind of survey might be the kind of person that might be more likely to like these things. So there might be a bias in the respondents, but it was time and time again. And it was not just here, it was everywhere, and much even heavier positivity in other parts of the world. And, I tried to find some studies, like one of the kind of hypotheses I came up with is like, maybe it's like a lot of, tactical urbanism like things. Like people don't really know what they're missing. Then once it's installed, maybe they change their mind, right? So after they might have a better positive, feeling about these things. So were there any before and after studies? And I didn't find any, at least in my review of what I was looking at so far. But what I did find is where it was already in place, the numbers were way higher compared to places where it wasn't yet in place. So you can kind of think that it would be heading in that direction.
So you're saying the more people experience it, the more they like it?
Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like. I don't think there's been a study to answer that specifically, but based on what the numbers I was seeing so far, the places where it was already in place, the numbers were significantly higher than the places where it wasn't. But in both cases, they were positive.
Interesting. Well, I think that then begs the question, something I speculated about a bit in the article that I wrote in City Lab, is if automatic enforcement works, which it certainly seems to, and it's relatively popular, which it seems to be according to research, why do so many states ban it, and why are so many legislators very, very wary of allowing local jurisdictions to apply automatic enforcement in a new use case? Like, for example, in the last, like a hot topic now in the last few years has been automatic bus lane enforcement with cameras. So you basically identify a car that is in a bus lane illegally, and then that driver gets a ticket in the mail. And I know every city that uses this, they basically had to lobby the hell out of their state legislatures to get permission. So why do you think that is, Wes? Why do we have a disconnect there?
It's probably the same reason I believe the narrative. And the politicians are probably seeing the same things I'm thinking, and they think it's a positive thing for their own popularity if they are anti this. And it's easy to be so. And I remember the governor of Texas, when they banned the red light cameras, or it was a camera enforcement more generally, but he put out maybe it was TikTok or whatever, a short video basically saying, I've done it, I've signed this thing, like we're no longer allowing these things. And we talked about that in class, and it was sort of interesting because we ended up at a point where, and I noticed this when I was in Australia too, because they have cameras like everywhere. The conversation around cameras there was always on safety. Here, the conversation regarding cameras is rarely on safety, and we haven't even talked about that actually that they work in terms of safety. We're talking more about how they're perceived. And that's whenever I hear cameras brought up here, it's always about the two facts that people seem to think that Big Brother's watching, then they seem to think it's a cash grab. But maybe if we can keep the conversation more on safety, we won't have the miscommunication on this front.
Well, and part of the problem, I'm actually going to blame the media in part for this. I mean, I read a whole bunch of local TV accounts in
Yeah.
preparing this story for City Lab, and the number of articles that are basically just full of residents complaining about getting a ticket in the mail without anybody really articulating the safety reason for deploying them is just stunning. And I know that I'm a part-time journalist myself, and I know that there's a desire to capture narratives of controversy that's more interesting to the reader. But in this case, I think the controversy is kind of a bogus one. It's overinflated or exaggerated, I should say. And I think the media bears some responsibility to that. But then, of course, you can always look to, I think, it's just sort of like the basic autocentrism of so many policies where you have a very motivated minority of car drivers who lose their mind over the perceived inequity of how dare you not let me drive however I want to, even though, of course, speeding or running through a red light is by definition illegal. And then, maybe electeds just sort of hear those voices more than they do the larger number of people who are like, oh, good, my streets are a little bit safer when I'm walking, or my daughter's on a bike or something like that. But that's me sort of trying to speculate a bit.
And whenever we have a public meeting where we're trying to do anything related to safety, you always have a vocal minority there that comes out strong against those things. And it would be similar when we're talking about camera enforcement. But, I sometimes think back to, like, I kind of started off more on the structural engineering side, and like that's a world you'd never let like somebody in a public meeting tell us to use a smaller beam. Like, no, like we're using this size beam for safety. Like, I don't care what the public thinks. And the same thing could be said for more things in the transportation realm, but we don't treat them in the same way. Like, we could be like, hey, like, we know this is safer, we're going to do this, and we don't really care what the vocal minority thinks, but we don't treat it in the same way. We're like, sometimes we let those people overwhelm like better, safer designs or things like camera enforcement.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go in a second, but before we flip over to your topic du jour, I'll just say that this is really in your wheelhouse with your book, Killed by a Traffic Engineer. It's like, I don't remember how many hundreds of pages that book was. So if this is a topic where you hadn't actually looked at the research yet, I'm just glad I could find a topic to zero in on that could help you learn something new about it.
Well, it's interesting because in the book, I'm being like, hey, don't rely on education, don't rely on enforcement. Like, let's try to use engineering to fix those problems. Like, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily against enforcement. And, that's one of the things I learned in Australia. Like, I remember I jumped in an Uber once, and this was 2017 when I was over there on my sabbatical, and the Uber driver was driving safer than any other Uber driver I've ever seen in my life. And I'd be like, hey, man, like, what's going on? Why, you're not really driving like I would expect. And he's like, there's cameras everywhere at every intersection. There's speed cameras, there's red light cameras. And he said, if I get one ticket, I lose money for the week. And not only is it a ticket costly in terms of money, but it also gives points on his license. Like, at least in Denver, it'll cost you like $75 to get one of these tickets. It doesn't actually carry over to points on your license. But over there, they treat it like a real ticket. So the mentality about how they behave in the system definitely, when it's ubiquitous in that way, it definitely changes people's behaviors.
Yeah, and I think we sort of skip past this. It's probably worth noting that the reasons why, I would argue, automatic enforcement is so superior to police officer-based enforcement is that it's, number one, more reliable. Like, the cameras don't miss someone. They're going to capture pretty much everything, and it's reliable. You don't have drivers thinking maybe I'll get lucky and get away with it. But also, you've got, and it's important, I think, to mention this, the cameras are not going to be sort of like weighing whether or not to give a ticket based on what the driver might look like, which removes, I think, one of the real risks of bias and removes the need for officer driver interactions that, particularly with minority communities, can become fraught.
Well, I think there are perhaps some unintended consequences, though. At least in Colorado, one of the things I noticed here than other places I've lived, there's a lot of people that go out of their way to mess up their license plate or
Yeah.
obscure it or not even
Yep.
have one whatsoever. So you're going to have more of that. And I was interested in how this happens. And there's technologies you can buy on Amazon that are supposed to hide your license plate. There's all that sort of world out there. So, there's that a great Twitter account that does all that kind of stuff in New York City.
Yep.
It's not just there. It's happening here as well. And I think it would happen more if camera enforcement became more and more. So you'd have to have something else trying to squash that part of it down.
Well, yeah, and my answer there is that's illegal behavior,
Oh,
and
yeah.
fine the hell out of them and impound their car if you need to. I think it's inexcusable.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
what the city of Aurora around here has done recently. They changed the rules so they can impound the car if the person has sort of three things. So no license plate, like no insurance, no license. They just take the car away. And I think in 30 days they sell the car. So there's been this perpetual selling of cars over in Aurora due to these reasons.
Well, the idea impoundment and selling of cars is a whole other topic that we could talk about. But I will say, I have zero patience for those who would obstruct their license plate to avoid paying a mandated charge. Like, I'm sorry, that's just deliberate criminal behavior as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, we could keep going longer, but
Yeah.
you have a topic yourself. Your roundabout, please.
My roundabout is a question that I got from my good friend Ryan, and it was kind of a question of a question. Ryan is a huge fan of the 99% Invisible podcast, and he kind of got me into it a little bit. I don't listen to it quite as much as him. And actually, his goal in life is to get me onto that podcast, and he's not yet managed that. Anyways, there was I guess their 15th anniversary just came up. So they did an episode where they would take questions from listeners, from readers or their Discord, all that sort of stuff. The first question in that he thought was right up our alley, and he really wanted to hear us answer it. So what I'm going to try to do now is actually play that question. We'll see if this technology works here.
A city hires you to make their residents' lives 10% better without spending any money. You could only rearrange, remove, or repurpose things that already exist. What do you do?
So should we start with Roman's answer? Because it might be.
Sure.
Okay, so I have one idea. I don't know if it completely fulfills the idea of no money, but if rearranging, removing, repurposing works, I feel like all those things involve like a little bit of money, honestly. But I think the best way to make a city better would be dedicated rapid bus lanes, which I think if you have the buses and you have the lanes and you just need to paint them and mark them, I think it kind of fulfills the mandate of the question. But that would be like regular, take every bus you have, school buses, public transit buses, and just have a lane, have them run every 10 minutes between places that are important. You will make a city tremendously better. I don't know if it's really free, but I also not to quibble with Taylor, just in general, the whole concept of like fixing stuff without money is like a thing that I find is like a weird political thing that people talk about. That is like, no, we actually throw money at things that we value, and that's okay. But I would throw a little bit of money at this. I think it's much cheaper than light rail and various other solutions. It really is a rearrangement of resources and the emphasis on making a city a better place. But rapid, very frequent bus routes between places would be huge. Dedicated bus lanes. That means like they run smoothly because there's no other cars in the lane. I think that's how I'd make a city better. Almost any city would be made better by that.
So that's the answer. Now, I love Roman's answer here, but as he acknowledges, it isn't free. Like as we speak, Denver's in the midst of our Colfax BRT, and I think we're spending $280 million on doing so.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Why? How do you spend $280 million on BRT?
Well, it's the buses. It's basically redesigning Colfax. I saw a video yesterday from RTD where they're showing how the buses are going to meet the platforms. So it's not just the sidewalk. The platforms are center running because the bus is center running. That's where the bus lanes are. Okay. So they built those platforms in the middle, and it's been taking time. It's been taking a lot of money. So Yeah, it's not quite free.
It's not just painting, in other words. Okay. All right.
Not quite. So I don't know. I'll let you go first. What do you think on this?
Well, I respect, if especially that was off the cuff in the moment. I think that's a pretty thoughtful answer from Mr. Mars, shall we say?
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah. There's other ways you can quibble and note that BRT requires a baseline of density and in a place to be able to make it worthwhile. If you just run BRT in the exurbs, where there's all single family homes spaced out, you're not going to get very far. You need to run in a place where there's potential riders or current riders who can really take advantage of it. But in general, I think it's a great answer. I might actually offer a related answer, I suppose, for something that doesn't cost anything, which is maybe just, it relates to what we were just talking about before. Maybe just enforce the bus lanes you already have with automatic bus cameras, because that can be revenue neutral or even positive, I would think. Because the bus lanes are only useful if they're actually for buses alone, and you have to enforce it to make it work. And relying on police alone isn't going to be able to do it because the cops can only be in so many places at once. That's one thought I have. Do you have something in mind, Wes?
So I had a lot of thoughts on this. Too many even to trying to arrange what I was thinking. I think my first thought is like, well, why don't we take what Roman's thinking a step further and like take our urban interstates, which we should not have in urban areas anyways, in cities, and like turn them into boulevards. And to me, it felt like it's in the spirit of the question in terms of rearranging. But again,
it's a ton of money, isn't it? It seems really expensive.
It's a lot of money. So then I started thinking like, if I'm trying to cook a good meal in my house, I don't want to order out. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I need to look around my pantry and my refrigerator. Like, what can I pull together based on what I have? So like, where would I start? I started thinking like, well, maybe start with kids. If I can make my city like 10% or 20% better for transportation for kids, it would probably make it 10% better for everyone else. And like, we could go ahead and maybe force car manufacturers to use geofencing technology and like literally not allow cars go faster than 20 miles per hour in cities, or like maybe even like 12 or 15 miles an hour near schools. Like even better, maybe make those streets in front of schools car-free during school hours. But like that's still, kind of pie in the sky type thinking. So like I also think we could do a lot of things pretty cheaply or with policies. Like maybe we, ban right turns in red. We get rid of slip
I thought of that too.
Cities.
Yeah.
Get rid of slip
getting
lanes.
rid of slip lanes, that's expensive, isn't it? Getting rid of slip lanes?
No, we just put some big boulders there and make people take a right turn. Then I started thinking, why don't we start using barn dances everywhere? Why don't we, everywhere we have a traffic signal where there's a left turn arrow, make sure it's a protected left turn. Give pedestrians like really the actual right of way. And you could also start using the signals to have a green wave for bicyclists, or even to slow cars down if cars are going too fast. And, then I started thinking about, we probably in our warehouse, in our pantry, we got a lot of extra stop signs. So start turning our two-way stops where possible into four-way stops, or, start daylighting intersections. Like things like that, I think you could do so cheaply and easily and make a big difference.
Well, it seems like, a lot of what you're thinking aligns with, I think, what Roman Mars was saying, which is sort of reallocating street space. It doesn't cost that much compared to, sort of doing a full scale road diet to basically say, let's cut off this slip lane. Let's reallocate this space to be a bike lane or a bus lane. I think that can make a lot of sense as an overall direction. I think the real constraints in reallocating street space are political rather than financial. I guess. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of cities, I think they started their first iterations of bike lanes with money that was already set aside for paving, right? So they didn't have money for bike lanes, but they were going to be repaving, restriping those streets every so often. So that's something that's already in the budget. So even though it costs money, you're using existing resources. So you could start doing street right sizing and road diets and stuff like that without really having to spend new money.
Yeah, I know that Cambridge, Massachusetts has what I think is sort of a national best practice in bike infrastructure. They actually passed a city law where the city DOT is required whenever doing a repaving to install any bike lane that is in the city's master network or the network of bike lanes. So there's no debate about whether or not to put in the bike lane. They have to. It's just a question of what it looks like.
Oh,
I think that's actually pretty good.
That is pretty good because one of the complaints I have about Denver is we have some neighborhoods that have what they call the Hollywood sidewalks, which are like 2.5 feet wide. You can't even get a wheelchair or a stroller on it.
Right.
And this is a couple of years ago, they were redoing, I think, the storm sewage on that street. So they tore up the street, they tore up the sidewalk, and it's a street that I bike past on the way to work quite often. And I was like, oh, this will be great. They're going to put in real sidewalks. Guess what? They put in the exact same small 2.5 foot sidewalks. And it's like, oh my God, like, what are we doing? Like, we rebuilt the sidewalk and couldn't fix that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, anytime you're doing a renovation of a street and you don't take advantage of that opportunity to install better infrastructure, it's just, you should go gray a little bit or lose your mind because it's just so upsetting.
Yeah,
I think and the only other thought I have in terms of things that are free or cost almost nothing that can really improve the city in a different direction, I would think of maybe setting a market price for street parking. So that, channel Donald Shoup and make sure that you charge enough that 15% of metered spots are available at any given time. So you don't force people to constantly circle looking for a spot because every spot is effectively subsidized. You collect more money that way, but you also reduce total VMT and pollution, vehicle miles traveled, along with pollution. And it seems like that could be a real win all around and potentially a net positive financially.
That actually, I think, ties into something back with our first topic, because one of the ways to get people on board with parking pricing is the parking benefits district, where basically you're taking the money from the parking and put it right back into those streets, into that neighborhood. Like, you could do the same thing. I mean, we can do it with congestion charging, but we could also do it with the camera enforcement, right? If we treat the camera enforcement like the same way we do a parking benefits district, and that money goes directly back to those streets to improve them and put street trees and whatever else, I think you'd even get higher levels of improvement than we already have.
No, it's a good point. And for those who are curious to learn more about this, the parking benefit district is a very innovative idea that I believe Shoup himself came up with for Pasadena. And you can read more about it. You can actually see the book behind me if I move my head in the right way. Paved Paradise by Henry Graybar, right there. Great book, and I think it's explained more in that book that came out a couple of years ago.
And old Pasadena, old downtown there. It's a great story. I've seen Jeff Tumlin present on that a few times. He does a great job of telling that story too.
Yeah. Well, let's go to mailbag. Do we have a question from our beloved listeners that we can discuss for a moment or two?
So looking at the YouTube chat, which is quite active today, which is exciting to see. Like, the first question on there is from Will. He posted it talking about our US-EU deal. And what he's saying is that the deal is allegedly reciprocal. So as much as he can sympathize with the Europeans on this, he'd also love to be able to import the practical, compact cars from the EU. Like, is that a possibility that we overlooked?
Will, I don't know who you are, but that's a great question. Very smart question. I don't know. I'm not sure anyone knows yet, but the reason why it's a great question, this is something I've done some research around and written about before. There's a whole classification of lower speed vehicles or micro cars, whatever you want to call them, like the Microlino, like the Citroën Ami, that go 45, 55 miles per hour. They are small. They actually max of 45 miles per hour. I don't quote me on this. I think it's 45 miles per hour max, but they are small. They're great for being in cities. Oftentimes in Europe, you can drive one legally at a younger age, like a 15-year-old can do so, and they are relatively affordable and city friendly. There's a whole classification of vehicles. None of these things are legal in the US because we have a low speed vehicle designation that basically blocks anything that goes faster than 25 miles per hour. So if you were to bring in a Microlino to be legally, if I understand this correctly, to be legally registered and be a legal vehicle on public roads, it would have to go through all of the rules for federal motor vehicle safety standards that are applied to, say, like a Subaru or an F-150, which you could argue, and I would argue, are not appropriate for something that's going to be used specifically in a city. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I've long wanted NHTSA to get its act together and create a new classification for these things. So I hope you're onto something there. Wes, what do you think?
There's a lot of places in this country where people are using golf carts in that way, including in my neighborhood in Denver. There's a lot of, kids that are not quite old enough to get a license. They're using these golf carts in like literal Denver city proper. So like, you could imagine if you could buy these vehicles, they could end up, somewhat similar to the way a lot of people use golf carts now. Like, even though they're not street legal, people still use the golf carts like that. And my father-in-law lives in the Villages in Florida, which is an entire golf course community. That's a whole nother story. But I don't know, like just the ability to perhaps get them and see them, and going back to some of the things we hit on earlier, like the touch them, see them, feel them, it gives people a different opinion. Like even yesterday I was on campus here and a very small car kind of went through an intersection, and it just was disconcerting how small it is. But that car would be sort of a normal car in a lot of parts of the world, and here it looked like a toy. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that come along with this, but it's a great question, and it's an important point that we need to look both ways at a question like this.
Yeah, well, it's true. And I'll just say really quick on, because this is something I used to be Mr. Golf Cart and Mini Car for a while there. Golf carts have no role in federal law whatsoever because they do not qualify as a low speed vehicle and certainly not as a full size car. So you can't actually register one at a state DOT. It's up to basically the local municipality or county to decide whether to register it or how to where to make it be allowed. What gets trickier is when you're talking about faster vehicles, which are what these mini cars in Europe really can be. So, Will, thank you for a very thoughtful question. And I frankly would love to see how this plays out myself.
All right. Do you have any questions on your end?
I do not for today, but we always love getting questions. So I'll just say you can always contact either Wes or me with questions, or you can just email them to us at lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. We always try to bring in a question or two if we can do it for each one of these episodes. But for now, it is time for Rail Drinks. This is the moment when Wes and I can exhale a little bit. We're almost done, and the evening is near. So we always have a little bit of a drink to share. Wes, as we do a little toast, what are you drinking today?
So today is 9/11, so I thought I would, in honor of that, drink something from New York. So I have this Hudson whiskey. It's a Manhattan rye. I assume they do not use Hudson River water in it, but my good friend Mike, who's not from New York, he's from D.C., this is one of his favorite distilleries. Whenever I'm with him, we often have this drink, so that's what I have tonight.
Well, if the proof is high enough, maybe you could handle Hudson River water. It just sort of depends. I don't know. And I, for my part, I've already been sipping it, honestly. I have some spiked coffee because I have to go work after this. So I'm trying to maintain energy. I've got some cream liqueur with my coffee, and I'm going to drink that now.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. And thus, we arrive at the conclusion of yet another episode of Look Both Ways with David and Wes. We are truly appreciative of all of you who are with us, either live or listening on your favorite podcasting app. Again, you can always email questions or comments to lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. I would be delighted if you tell a friend or two or leave a review if you've enjoyed it. That's how the word gets out, and we're always looking to do that. If you have thoughts or comments, you can contact me through my website, which is davidzipper.com. I have a newsletter there called Paved with Good Intentions. It's free. And Wes, have you decided yet to let people contact you, or are you still saying stay away?
For the most part, I am using Blue Sky a little bit more than I ever have.
I noticed that. That's good for you.
To you egging me on. I still try to not partake very much. But so when's the next episode?
Oh, the next episode, glad you asked, is Tuesday, September 23rd at 6 p.m. EST. If you want to join us live, you will be able to do it right here on YouTube. And we really do appreciate you being here with us, and we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.